I think the ego came from a time when, you know, humans were growing into self-awareness. So that self-awareness, of course, found identification in the world around itself. And so through this identification, it began to separate itself from other people, other objects, into this sort of springing notion of like, what am I? You know, and that sort of drive, that inner drive that we probably felt during those ancient times to figure that question out, it started to separate itself from other things. Whereas, you know, most animals and you know, I don't call them preliminary beings, but primitive beings, you know, they probably just kind of go with it. They sense and they react and respond with rudimentary forms of higher level consciousness. But, you know, now that human beings have awoken to a point of introspection, we now have this I notion. What am I? I'm no longer just a function of Earth that spawned from this or that. I am now, you know, a being. I'm an individual. My life matters, right? I really care whether or not I live or die. And I have ideas about whether or not I live or die. And, you know, and that, of course, leads into, well, if this is what I am, then what are you?
So, who are you referring to when you say I? Like, I am going to the store. What do you mean by that? So each of us has a construct of who we think I am. And it is a set of beliefs that we live by. We think that's who we are. We over-identify with it. And it gets us into trouble because we're not connected. So one of the ideas or beliefs that we have is, I am what I do. Maybe if you're a doctor or you're an attorney or whatever, I am an attorney, I'm a doctor. Or it's what I have. I live in a big house, I drive the fancy cars. That's me. That's, you know, if I didn't have these, then I would not exist, right? Part of me would just not be there. Or it's what other people think of me. So I work really hard to make sure that other people think good of me. So my whole life is revolving around this set of beliefs and ideas about myself.
It's almost like an entity within yourself. It's something that tends to want to take control of the situations. Probably due to our fear, and basically how we look at the world around us. Because fear comes up so much, and the ego tends to really just feed off of that fear. If you look at it as an entity, it wants to live. So what do we need to live? We need to feed off of something. And then it almost acts kind of like a parasite within. And yeah, it feeds from time to time, especially if we resist it. The main thing for humans to get past it is to do their best to not resist it, because only when you resist it, it creates energy that actually resonates with the ego, and the ego actually becomes stronger. You know, it's like that saying, what you resist persists.
I think a lot of people on their spiritual journey, and even those who are not, can subconsciously do what I'm about to ask, we have a tendency to turn the ego into our enemy. You know, in terms of when you're trying to be free of the ego, I think in a lot of spiritual terms we hear about the ego, even in a psychological sense, we hear the damage the ego may do, and so on and so forth. Is the ego our enemy?
No, we couldn't operate without it. It is, it's, in my best understanding, the ego is the self, and the self is that psychic construct of ideas, feelings, and values out of which we operate in the world. So I don't think of it as evil or bad. It can be damning of others. It can be punishing. If this separation of self and others is too, let's say, too dramatic or too firm, then it can be a weapon to assault, intimidate, make fun of other people. Because for some people, maybe those who are very insecure, that is tantamount to building up this sense of me. And so that might be the shadow side, if you will, of the ego. But then the other side is that the self, out of which we operate, has this potential to become spiritualized.
We have to understand that the ego is not the enemy, and that it does have a function. The ego does have a function. It's never going to go away, but we have to let it be a natural function. It's almost like the ego came to take control of our ship because we weren't there. We weren't being the captain of our ship, so it came and took the helm. And so that's how we change it. We take the helm. We become more conscious by stilling the thoughts in the mind, the rampant thoughts. That's how we change the purpose of it and let it be its function. It's going to have rudimentary functions to make judgments and coordinate and to figure out sort of its place in the world. There's a relative function, even a healthy functioning for that, and we have to let it go back to that while we take command of our ship. So it seems like the ego has an aim quite often to keep you down, shy, or isolated. Mm-hmm. Why is it?
Control. You see it in world leaders. They want to control everything. So they convince you that the outside is ugly. This is where you need to be. You don't need them. You only need us. Let's create some enemies. Let's wage some war. Let's be right. And the only way we could be right if they're wrong. That's the only way. We can't both be right. That's wrong. But it's not. Everyone can be right. Everyone has their own opinion about things. I keep going back to control, but it's really, that's what it's all about. It's the way to control other people is through fear. So the ego is a reflection of that. So it definitely wants to use that as much as possible to stay in control.
When we're young, we have two baskets. Let's think of two baskets. So the first time your mom reprimanded you for doing something, like, I don't know, spilling the milk or doing something you shouldn't have done, right there, you got the sense that, this is not good, right? So you stick it in this basket of, I don't want others to know that I am this bad person, okay? That I can be a bad person. So that becomes like your basket, which is called your shadow. This is stuff that we don't want others to know about us. And actually, it's even hidden from our own consciousness. And then, let's say you went to school and you got praised. Okay? Now, that is something that you want others to know, and you like that about yourself. So that goes in the other basket. And that is your ego.
Those kinds of addictions or habitual patterns of reaching for that good feeling, those highs or whatever they are for you, can totally circumvent the development of the self because they take over the self. Then the self is a slave to those things. Most of us seek things that are pleasurable. But you need to have an aware ego. And I think whether you call it the ego or the mental structures of your awareness, this needs to happen so that you can take yourself out of yourself and see the self that you are interacting with these things around you, so that you have the will to exit from that continual pattern.
So when a person is feeling disempowered, they are going to do whatever it takes to feel in control and empowered again. So that may include violence. And and I was running like batterers groups, and what they do is they escalate when they feel like they don't have control over their partner. They escalate the behavior, so the violence just becomes more and more and more serious. It might start off with a push and then a slap, and then I had one guy who squeezed his wife's head so hard that he fractured the skull and caused her to go into a coma. So that didn't just happen. He's sitting there going, I can't believe I did that. So where's that coming from? That's part of the shadow. Because you don't even know that you're capable of doing it. So the violence is a slow escalation of that disempowered feeling. So the violence is going to continue to become more and more when that ego feels threatened, when the ego feels like it's going to be annihilated. It won't have it. It will do whatever is necessary to maintain its place inside of you. So it's going to use you. That's when the ego is using you. So you're not using the ego at that point. And what you don't own owns you.
how do we become confident without the ego?
So that's a good one. So there is a massive difference between confidence and cockiness. All right? Cockiness is self-serving. Cockiness relies on others being wrong, relies on others being worse than, not as good as, to provide that sense of superiority. Confidence is without a feeling of superiority, but it does have a sensation of accomplishment. It's, I am capable. I know I can do this. And it doesn't need others to be bad at the same task or unable to do the same thing. It doesn't require that. True confidence doesn't need that at all. It can perform, without praise, or tearing others down. And in order to get to that state, again, you take the helm and you understand, and you for one, start to feel the joy of what you do, feel the beauty of it, your abilities to actually perform a certain task, appreciate that fact that you can do this. And beyond that, bask in the joys of growing at what you do. A true master is great at what he does because he knows how to fall, right? And he understands the importance of falling and then getting his ass back up. And that's how you get confident, is that you know how to do what you can do, but then you also know that making a mistake is okay and that you will continue on and improve. The notion of constant learning, being a constant student, is the master's greatest secret. How have we mistaken the ego for ourselves?
How have we mistaken the ego for ourselves?
How have we come to be identified?
Well, we believe that's who we are. So even though it's kind of a voice that goes on forever, it seems, we still believe that that's who we are. So we haven't experienced any oneness. We kind of live through our emotions. We live through things that happen every day, and that's really just a reflection of our own thoughts. So we believe the thoughts, we believe what the ego is telling us. So it's very difficult to not believe that, because you don't learn that from an early age. Nobody, maybe very few do, but most of us don't. We get a name as soon as we're born. We almost have an instant culture that we're born into, and the family culture. And then you're the brother or you're the sister. It's endless. It just keeps going. It's on and on and on. So how can you not believe that you're the ego?
We got to share. We live on this planet together. We got to share with all these creatures. We got to share with all these people who are different from ourselves, who don't have the same advantages that we have. We got to share. And that necessitates our growing this sense of self in more and more inclusive directions.
So our goals have to change. Our means have to change. The violence is only going to grow if the goals don't change. Because remember, the human being always wants more. The human being always wants to achieve whatever it set out to do, and once it does that, then it wants more. There's no end point. So how do we break that cycle? People will come to me oftentimes in therapy and say, well, how long is this going to take? And I said, I have no idea. You may not need to come back after today's session, or it may take you 10 years. Who cares? You're headed in the right direction. Keep walking.